Why does Turkey get to single-handedly deny Sweden entry into NATO? Because NATO is a defense treaty that requires all nations to defend each other if one of them gets attacked. They make all decisions by consensus. All member countries have to agree to all decisions. It's not simple majority. Admitting new countries, members is by unanimous decision. Because it's not a democratic club. It's a defense treaty. Think of it like this. You and some of your best friends agree that no matter what, you'll defend each other with your life should anyone in your group get attacked. A new person wants to join your pact, but you don't like them. For whatever reason, will you agree to defend them with your life? Will someone else who also doesn't agree to their admittance be expected to defend the new person with their life? TLDR. It has to be admittance by unanimous consent, because if it wasn't built that way it would be ineffective. Article 10 of the NATO Treaty requires unanimous agreement of all members when admitting a new member. When NATO was formed, the world was a very different place. We had just gotten through a world war, and 30 years prior a different world war had begun almost exclusively because of a system of alliances. And in that war, some members of the alliance decided not to honor the agreement because countries were getting brought into these agreements that people had opposed joining. Becoming a member of NATO requires every single country to individually ratify the inclusion of that country in the alliance in order to maintain the integrity and sovereignty of each membership. The worry was that the Anglo members, US, Britain, Canada, would allow members in that align better with their geopolitical interests rather than the protection of Europe from godless communism. There was even a worry that colonies like Hawaii, Puerto Rico, French Guiana, and Ceuta could trigger a war, so those were actually excluded from the alliance. Because of this, every single member of NATO gets a veto on new members joining. The alliance has grown from 12 members to 31, so Anglo nations are now the weaker voting members of the alliance. But usually the process for joining NATO is a lot longer. It took Albania and Croatia 10 years to join NATO, and NATO forced them into a bunch of programs to bring up their standards. And this process, called MAP, happened for all but 15 of the current member states. Finland and Sweden are unique. They're being invited without having any kind of organizational preparation. Both of these nations agreed to be neutral for a long time, and now with Russian aggression on the rise they're looking to become members. The heads at NATO decided to structure this process without considering the relationship issues that some countries had with others. Just to give you an idea of how fast this is going, it took 6 years for Turkey to join NATO. Turkey has control of the Black Sea and has been NATO's second most important ally, after the US, in stopping Russia, and it took 4 years to agree to let them in. In order for Turkey to join NATO, they had to send troops to Korea to assist the US. After they did this, the US did a campaign around Europe convincing their other allies that Turkey would be a valuable ally. And that's actually how Turkey has treated NATO since the only way for them to get into NATO was through negotiations and giving in to others' demands. They used the process as a means of getting things from other countries. But this stuff all happened behind closed doors in the MAP program. Now it's happening in the public and doesn't look good. The other thing I think is that NATO ascension isn't that popular in Finland and Sweden. 76% of Finns and 57% of Swedes want to join NATO according to latest polls. That's a majority, but not a lot of wiggle room. That's also all-time highs. So Finland has enough political wiggle room to give in to Turkey. But Sweden doesn't, and NATO High Command know this. They know if these countries are made to go through that 10-year process other countries went through, they'd never agree to join. The whole point of NATO is that Turkey is required to go war for Sweden. So of course they have a say in it. I believe NATO's rules require unanimous consent to admit a new member. According to Turkey, Sweden has taken a strong position towards PKK, a separatist group in Turkey who have resorted to terrorist attacks in the past. Several countries recognize they are a terrorist group. Sweden denies this allegation. Nevertheless, Sweden joining NATO means Turkey has to go fight anyone who attacks them. It's kind of hard to start defending a guy who's been digging your grave. If that's what you believe they have been doing, that's the reasoning. But if you ask me, Erdogan is being the emotional attention lover autocrat he has always been. Elections are coming up in Turkey and this is how he stays in power. Unfortunately, declaring him a dictator is not straightforward. Turks have chosen his rule over and over because they have rules they follow. If they accept Sweden without Turkey's approval, then Turkey might not feel obligated to help if Sweden is attacked, or vice versa. That would defeat the point of the alliance. Because treaties have rules and one of NATO's is unanimous consent when letting someone new in. It's an annoying rule at the moment because Erdogan stinks, but it's still one of the rules. Bigger picture, it's not hard to understand why the rule exists though when you think about the implications of Article 5. It has to be unanimous. You don't get into an alliance where you are bound to shed blood for them if called for if you didn't agree to join in the first place. I asked my uncle, who's a retired doctor of political science. Here's his response. NATO requires all members to agree to adding any new member. Turkey may agree after their election. Right now in Turkey, being tough on Sweden appeals to the nationalists who think Sweden is harboring Kurdish extremists. Think strategically, not politically. Basically, that's how the NATO bylaws are written. Every current member has to agree to allow a new member in, because that's what all the parties that signed the treaty agreed to. When you have to go to war to protect someone, you should get a veto over who that is. That doesn't mean what Turkey is doing is right in this circumstance, but the principle is valid. From my understanding, the only reason that Sweden is unable to enter NATO is due to Erdogan being a salty dictator. Yeah, you understand nothing. That's not about Erdogan or dictating at all. Every Turkish citizen literally supports the decision of blocking Sweden till Sweden stops supporting terrorist PKK, PYD, YPG and FETÖ. Finland agreed to fight against those terrorist groups and Turkey instantly let them in and approved it. I remember 10-20 years ago our president said, "Dear Sweden, you're supporting terrorists now with no coincidences. But someday you will need us and those terrorists will be your problem." When NATO was set up, it was set up with rules. And one of those rules was that new memberships must be unanimously approved. The voting process of NATO is democratic, where unanimity wins. Which makes sense based on the purpose and obligations of NATO. If a fellow NATO country is attacked, you are obligated to support them. Likely by, but not necessarily or limited to, sending your own soldiers to die for them. I think that every country that has this obligation has the right to veto their own obligation. Also, it's Turkey officially now. They stopped wanting to be associated with the bird last year. It all started when King Charles XII asked the Ottomans for asylum and then they gave him to the Russians later. They still beefin', s.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.